In the first segment of the show, I broke down the 5 quarterbacks and ranked them in terms of the situation that I think they find themselves in if I were buying stock in them right now. Stop me if you've heard it before, but everything broke the Patriots' way. Mac Jones, they don't even have to move. They grab him at 15 when the expectation was that he was going to be gone at 3. Trey Lance, I think, to the 49ers. I love both of these guys because they have the opportunity to sit behind Cam Newton and Jimmy Garoppolo, respectively. In theory, both of those guys are going to be on the roster this year. Trevor Lawrence to the Jags. I like the addition of Travis Etienne. We barely even talked about the idea of Tim Tebow coming out of retirement to play tight end for the Jags, but that's how interesting that team has suddenly become. Justin Fields to the Bears. I like the idea that he can sit behind Andy Dalton and start to get more comfortable. But Matt Nagy, the coach there, I just don't buy into him as the difference maker for the Chicago Bears. And then Zach Wilson, given the long-range futility, even with a brand-new coach and regime there, I'm not optimistic necessarily in how he is going to do with the Jets. Overall, so that's my ranking 1 to 5 if I had to buy stock in these quarterbacks, not based on the individual quarterback talent, but based on Mac Jones to the Patriots, Trey Lance to the 49ers, Trevor Lawrence to the Jags, Justin Fields to the Bears, and Zach Wilson to the Jets. That's the order in which I would expect them to have success. Overall draft picks, the SEC with 12 picks in the first round, the Big Ten with 7, ACC with 6, Pac-12 with 3, Big 12 with a big fat 0 first-round picks. Worth mentioning, Alabama ties the Miami Hurricanes for the most first-round picks ever with 6, 5 of them on the offensive side of the ball, which is pretty extraordinary. Putting this into further perspective, the 2017 Alabama recruiting class might just be the best ever. This is pretty wild to think about. 4 different first-rounders in 2020. Tua, Jedrick Wills, Henry Ruggs, and Jerry Jeudy. This year, 4 different first-rounders again. Devontae Smith, Mac Jones, Alex Leatherwood, and Najee Harris. And potentially some guys who could get drafted out of this class still to come next year. That is remarkable. At least 8 first-round draft picks in one single recruiting class. That has to be a record for the greatest ever. Speaking of the greatest ever, how many really good players were there in that Alabama-LSU game in 2019 when Joe Burrow went on the road and won in Bryant-Denny Stadium, that iconic classic game between Alabama and LSU? I was there. It was amazing to watch. We now know, at least so far, how many different first-rounders were on the field in that game. Think about this with me for a minute. Alabama, Tua, Jalen Waddle, Patrick Surtain, Jedrick Wills, Devontae Smith, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, Mac Jones, who came on just to be a holder, Alex Leatherwood, and Najee Harris. Think about this. That Alabama offense had Tua and Mac Jones, 2 first-round quarterbacks, 4 first-round wide receivers, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, a first-round running back in Najee Harris, and 2 different tackles who were first-rounders as well in Jedrick Wills and in Alex Leatherwood. Guys, that's more first-round draft picks than any offense in the NFL would have this upcoming year. Think about that for a minute. Only one of those players, by the way, on the defensive side of the ball, Patrick Surtain, at least so far, and there probably will be other draft picks still to come out of that game, but it does discuss the overall trajectory of college football and how talent now, at least in the SEC even, it's fun and interesting to think about the difference between the 9-6 game that Alabama won against LSU when all of the talent was on the defensive side of the ball by and large for both of those teams compared to now in the 2019 game when almost all the talent was on the offensive side of the field. By the way, for LSU, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Chase on the linebacker whose name I'm going to mess up, Justin Jefferson, Patrick Queen, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 6 different first-rounders on the field for LSU. 16 first-rounders in that game already since 2019. That is an unprecedented amount of talent. Let me repeat that. 16 different first-rounders played in the 2019 Alabama going up against LSU story. So the big story that dropped as well that had nothing to do with what was going to happen in the draft itself, what in the world is going to end up happening with Aaron Rodgers and everyone and that drama, which is not going to end, I don't believe, anytime soon. I asked the poll question, whose side are you on in the NFL's newest stare down? Aaron Rodgers demanding a trade or the Packers refusing to trade him? In the first 20 minutes, nearly 10,000 of you have voted in this poll question. You can go get your vote in at Clay Travis. Track me down on Twitter. Place your vote right now. 62% of you are saying you are on Aaron Rodgers' side. 38% of you are on the Packers side. All right, so that is kind of setting the table for where we are right now with everything that is going on in the day after the NFL draft. Remember, there are a ton of really good players still available with the second and the third round to come on Friday, followed by the 4th through the 7th round on Saturday. Let me bring in the crew and go around the horn and say, what team's pick did you like the most in the first round? And I'll start, and it's probably a cliche, but it's the New England Patriots. I feel like Mac Jones is a perfect fit for Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick. Even the picture with him shirtless, he looks like Brady. Not exactly a physical specimen, but smart, cerebral in the pocket, moves well with his feet. There is a good talent already there now. I like the Hunter Henry and the additions that have already been made on the free agency wish list there. I don't believe Jonnu Smith, by the way, the other tight end that the Patriots went and paid big money for. Those are underneath guys that will not create, that will be nice security, safety blankets for Mac Jones, but he doesn't have to play immediately. You've got 2 Auburn guys in Jarrett Stidham and Cam Newton, and now you have an Alabama guy in Mac Jones. I like Mac Jones' ability to come in and slowly fit into the Patriot offense. If Mac Jones really is a revelation and looks ready to play early, then you've got Cam Newton under a 1-year deal, so you haven't committed any substantial dollars to him long term, and maybe there's a team out there that's going to need a veteran at some point in the season. If you're the Patriots, you could potentially get a value for Cam Newton by being able to trade him away. Being able to sit there at 15 and have a guy who was projected to be number 3 fall all the way to you. To me, the best situation in the NFL draft was what happened with the New England Patriots. Everything seems to break their way. First time ever, Bill Belichick has drafted a first-round quarterback. Prior to now, Jimmy G was his highest draft pick. Mac Jones feels like a perfect fit to me in New England. Danny G, what team's move did you like the most?
Couple quick ones for me. I really liked how the Jets moved up to guarantee that they would land Elijah Vera Tucker to protect their new franchise quarterback in Zach Wilson. You know, Sam Darnold was watching that, cursing at his TV screen. The Jets had one of the worst O-lines in all of football last season, so that was smart to do that. And then I really like what the Cowboys did. They moved back because the corner that they really wanted wasn't there anymore, so they instead went with who I think might be the best defensive player when we look back at this draft in a couple of years, Micah Parsons. And what a celebration as he jumped into Roger Goodell's arms.
Yeah, look, I think that was a good move for the Cowboys. They still have major issues at corner, and they're just going to have to basically decide. Hopefully Dak is back healthy with CeeDee Lamb, with Michael Gallup, and with Amari Cooper. They're just going to have to hope that they outscore everybody, not to mention Ezekiel Elliott. But they had a desperate need at corner, and they didn't fill it. And if I'm a Cowboy fan, that makes me a little bit nervous. Dub, what say you?
I think it's Jalen Waddle going to Miami because he's reuniting with Tua, and also they're giving Tua the weapons that he would need in theory. And this is going to be a big year because we've mentioned it many times on this show. I mean, he was average at the very best last year in his rookie season. Granted, he had the hip injury, so he's got to be. You got to think he's healthier this year. They're surrounding him with guys that can catch and run after the catch. I know better than anybody watching Jalen Waddle in the Iron Bowl absolutely just toast Auburn many times. So that was my favorite play with the Dolphins picking up what I think is a star receiver.
Ceiling-wise, Jalen Waddle could be Tyreek Hill. And we know how much difference that makes for Tyreek Hill does for Travis Kelce. If I'm Mike Gesicki, the tight end at Miami, who has made decent amount of plays, has looked good out of Penn State, been there a couple of years, 2-3 years, I'm thinking to myself, oh, wow, we've got a guy who can take the top off the defense now. He's going to open up the underneath of the field in a big way. Best case scenario for the Miami Dolphins, you have got a budding ability to develop a big-time athletic tight end with that over-the-top threat in Jalen Waddle, who could hopefully be the Tyreek Hill version of the AFC East for the Dolphins, and for Tua in him hopefully taking that next step in year 2 in the Dolphin offense. What about you, Eddie? Was there a pick that you saw and you thought this is a great one? This is a perfect fit.
Well, I love the Jalen Waddle pick because that's what I predicted on the show, and it made me look smart. And I mean, Mac Jones, the Patriots got their quarterback. They didn't have to move up to get him.
Yeah, I know.
But, if I'm going to pick one, and you can call me biased, and I know it wasn't a surprise, but Najee Harris to the Steelers.
It's a good pick.
I absolutely loved it. Everyone said it was going to happen. It made too much sense. The Steelers' running game last year wasn't bad. It was atrocious. It was horrifically awful, and this guy is an absolute stud. Now, I know they need to shore up their offensive line to give him some holes to run through, but I think this guy's going to be amazing.
To me, Le'Veon Bell was the best running back that we've seen paired with Ben Roethlisberger. I've watched a lot of Le'Veon Bell over the years, and I've watched a lot of Najee Harris. I think Najee Harris can be as good or better than Le'Veon Bell was in that Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Now, they still have issues on the offensive line, but Najee Harris is great out of the backfield. He runs with power, but also with purpose in the same way that Le'Veon Bell does. In other words, Le'Veon Bell didn't get ahead of his blocking and didn't rush plays. He allowed them to develop. It was incredibly patient as a running back. And I can see the same sort of traits in Najee Harris. I think he's going to be a tremendous asset to the Steelers offense, and I agree with you, Danny G, that he's a great fit. What about you, Roberto? Who stands out to you? What pick stands out to you?
I like what the Bears did, moving up to get Justin Fields, because they were going with, at that point they were going with the Red Rifle and Andy Dalton there. So I like even though I agree with you, I don't believe in Matt Nagy. He's supposed to be an offensive guy who gave up play calling duties. But I like what the Bears did to get Justin Fields there.
The other thing I would say as you kind of unpack everything is, and we'll talk a bit about this when we come back, but there are a lot of risks that were taken. Maybe the riskiest high-risk, high-reward move might be by the Titans. We'll talk a little bit about that, but I want to talk with the crew about risky moves that could have big payoffs. But first, I want to go over our draft outcome. A little bit of a controversy because we ended up getting two different players to the right teams, but then there were trades.
Yeah.
And so, like, the easy example is Devontae Smith went to the Eagles, but the Eagles had to trade up to get him potentially. I loved the idea of Devontae Smith to the Eagles. I don't think we can count those because we could end up in the years ahead as we do the OutKick mock draft where we get the benefit of a trade happening and the guy going in the spot. But even without being able to count those, if we counted those, we had two different teams that drafted the right guy, but just in the wrong spot, right? Am I correct in that, Danny G?
Correct, because the Jets moved up and got Vera Tucker, who a listener chose for the Jets.
Yep. So I feel,
but isn't it more important that the team matches the player rather than the number in the draft?
That's an excellent question. I feel like typically the way that you grade whether you get a draft pick right is based on the spot, not based on the team. So we got 8 spots right. We got 10 teams right.
Correct.
If that makes sense to people out there. And so I think that's a intriguing dilemma. What do you guys think? Dub, what do you think? Is it spot or team?
I've been going back and forth on this, for the last couple hours. It's tough because we don't allow trades in the mock draft, right? So I feel like
correct.
In the process of the mock draft, the team is essentially the most important aspect. But
yeah, and sorry to cut you off, but when we have, like, for instance, Devontae Smith, this is a need for the Eagles, and if we're giving credit to the caller, we're asking them to fit a need, and we're saying, hey, we have the right. Like, who was the guy that somebody tried to draft that we just said, hey, that's not going to happen? I think it was at 16, and then we ended up hitting.
Was it Wyatt Davis?
Wyatt Davis, I think that was right. And we said, no, that's not going to happen. And basically I think that was the only pick that we crossed out in the entirety of the draft. So that, I mean, sorry to cut you off, Dub, but it is interesting because you're like, hey, Devontae Smith, we need a move to be made. And so what's your final verdict on that?
I think I'm kind of leaning more towards the team being the most important aspect because, like you just mentioned, we're drafting for the Eagles. Are the Eagles need a wide receiver? They draft Devontae Smith, who we predicted. It just was 2 spots ahead of where they were originally slotted.
Yeah, it's a good point. What about you, Eddie? How would you assess spot or team?
Whatever makes us look better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a good answer.
Yeah.
Either way, it's a new record because even without those 2 teams, we still would have 8 correct, which, beat the record of 7.